The retail markup on apparel is astronomical. You print a graphic on an $8 cotton blank. You tag it at $80, and you convince yourself you've discovered an 89% profit machine. On paper, it looks like printing cash. In practice, direct-to-consumer fashion brands routinely report gross margins that make software executives jealous, only to watch their bank accounts drain to zero before Q4. Most new apparel labels shut down within 36 months. Dead. Gone. Disappeared. The paradox of the clothing business is simple. The barrier to entry has evaporated, but the barrier to profitability is absolute. You're not competing against other designers. You are competing against supply chain gravity, algorithmic ad auctions, and a wall of unsold cotton that eats your working capital alive. Here is how a business with an eightfold product markup still manages to starve its owners. Getting into the game requires surprisingly little money at the start, which is precisely why so many amateurs drown in it. At the bootstrapped tier, $5,000 buys you a Shopify domain, a batch of screen-printed blanks, and a small inventory run of 300 units. You store the boxes in your spare bedroom. You pack orders by hand. You sell to friends, family, and a few dozen strangers converted through organic TikTok posts. You think you are an entrepreneur. In reality, you are an unpaid warehouse clerk. To step up to the mid-market tier, the capital requirement jumps to $250,000. At this level, you transition from print-on-demand blanks to custom cut and sew manufacturing in Portugal or China. You commit to minimum order quantities of 2,000 units per style. You hire a third-party logistics provider to store and ship your inventory. You hire a digital agency to manage a $50,000 monthly ad budget. You are generating real top-line revenue now, but every single dollar of incoming cash is instantly swallowed by pre-orders for the next season's line. At the institutional elite tier, opening a global fashion house requires $20 million in day-one liquidity. You secure prime retail leases on Soho or Bond Street. You build dedicated global supply chains. You maintain permanent flagship showrooms. And you sign multi-million-dollar celebrity ambassadorships. At this scale, you are no longer selling garments. You are managing a global real estate footprint and a massive brand equity hedge. To understand where the cash disappears, you must look at the mechanical engine of apparel economics. Think of a clothing brand not as a creative fashion house, but as a toll booth sitting between an overseas textile mill and an easily distracted consumer. The first metric that tricks new founders is landed cost. That is the actual cost to manufacture one hoodie. Ship it across the Pacific, clear customs, and land it on a warehouse shelf. A hoodie might cost $12 at the factory gate in Guangzhou. Freight adds $3. Import tariffs add another $2. By the time it sits in a fulfillment center, your landed cost is $17. If you sell that hoodie for $80, your gross margin looks phenomenal. Then the real engine kicks in, customer acquisition cost, or CAC. In digital fashion, you are buying human attention in an open auction hosted by Meta and Google. A decade ago, acquiring a customer cost $12. Today, blinding privacy updates and relentless ad competition have pushed average acquisition costs north of $45 per transaction. Here is the counterintuitive reality that ruins most founders. On the very first purchase, almost every direct-to-consumer clothing brand loses money. If your landed cost is $17, Your shipping and fulfillment cost is $8. Your credit card processing fee is $3. And your acquisition cost is $45. You spent $73 to generate an $80 sale. After overhead, you bled cash on the transaction. The entire survival of the business hinges on lifetime value, or LTV. You must convince that customer to return and buy 3 more times without paying Meta a single dollar to reacquire them. But in apparel, repeat purchase rates sit at a brutal 25%. 3 out of 4 customers buy once, take a photo for Instagram, and never return. If the ad account does not destroy you, the physical reality of inventory will finish the job. Apparel is a perishable asset disguised as durable goods. Trends expire in 90 days. Weather changes overnight. A warehouse full of heavy winter coats in April is worthless capital. Consider the physical trap of minimum order quantities and size runs. A factory will not turn on its machines for 50 garments. They demand a minimum of 500 units per colorway. Because human bodies come in different shapes, you must order across 5 sizes, extra small to extra large. That single hoodie design now requires 2,500 individual units locked in cardboard boxes. Then comes the return rate horror. Physical retail stores suffer a 5% return rate. Online apparel sits at an eye-watering 35%. 1 out of every 3 garments shipped to a customer comes flying back to the warehouse. Worse, reverse logistics is an operational bloodbath. The customer opens the package, tries on the hoodie, leaves pet hair or makeup on the collar, and ships it back. A warehouse worker must inspect the garment, steam it, re-polybag it, and put it back on the shelf. The cost to process a return often exceeds the original profit margin of the sale. You paid outbound shipping. You paid return shipping. You paid processing fees. And now you hold a discounted garment that is already going out of style. Look at the balance sheets of brands that tried to scale through brute force, and you will see the same fatal mechanics at work. Take Nasty Gal. Founded by Sophia Amoruso in 2006, the brand began as a scrappy eBay vintage shop and exploded into a darling of the venture capital world. By 2012, revenue surpassed $100 million. Investors poured $65 million into the company to fuel hypergrowth. But the expansion relied heavily on aggressive customer acquisition spend and massive inventory commitments. When organic customer retention lagged and acquisition costs surged, the brand was left with enormous lease obligations, bloated overhead, and warehouses brimming with unsold inventory. Unable to convert its top-line hype into sustainable cash flow, Nasty Gal filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2016. Liquidation followed shortly after. Or study the collapse of Missguided. The UK fast fashion giant built a multi-hundred-million-pound empire by dropping thousands of cheap new styles every week. To keep the machine running, Missguided accumulated massive operational friction. They overcommitted to ocean freight containers, built sprawling fulfillment infrastructure, and engaged in vicious price wars that eroded contribution margins down to zero. When supply chain bottlenecks hit in 2021 and container shipping rates surged tenfold, Missguided was caught in a lethal pincer movement, skyrocketing freight bills on one side and price-sensitive customers on the other. Suppliers were left unpaid for millions of pounds in inventory. By May 2022, Missguided plunged into administration, proving that high volume without strict cash flow discipline is simply a slower form of corporate suicide. At its ultimate core, the economics of owning a clothing brand can be reduced to a single razor-thin equation. Net profit equals customer lifetime value minus landed cost, minus acquisition cost, minus logistics, minus the terminal value of unsold inventory. When you strip away the glamour, the runway shows, and the glossy Instagram shoots, the actual net profit margin for a surviving, highly optimized apparel brand sits at a modest 5 to 8%. The operators who amass true fortunes in fashion rarely do so by falling in love with fabric. Amancio Ortega built Inditex and Zara into a $90 billion empire not by acting as an artistic designer, but by building a ruthless, hyper-agile logistics network that moves a garment from drawing board to retail shelf in 15 days flat, obliterating inventory holding costs before they can accrue. The system is beautifully engineered. The ad platforms collect their toll on every click. The freight lines take their cut on every container. The payment processors deduct their percentage on every swipe. The factories get paid up front before a single garment leaves the port. The brand owner sits at the very end of the line, taking all of the inventory risk, absorbing all of the return liability, and praying that the remaining 5% margin arrives. Before next season's invoice comes due,